My name is 𝗟𝗂𝗲𝗄𝗏. Welcome to another video of mine about industrial design. I'm going to show you how to do a rendering of a simple glass bottle. I'm going to use some newsprint. It's not an ideal medium to do a rendering on, but it's what I had available, and it also allowed me to draw at a slightly larger scale than I normally would, and that's good for a demo when you're demoing to a bunch of people. Newsprint, you can see the lines are kind of difficult to draw. I'm sitting down. It's a little bit out of my comfort zone. So the lines are slightly skewed in perspective. I first draw in a box, and then I add in my top and my bottom curve. And now I'm just putting in the basics of the glass reflection. I've decided that on my left side of the bottle is where I'm going to have the white highlight from the light source on the left side. And I spend a fair amount of time here actually just sort of drawing out or planning out the highlight. And I do this with my pen, and it works out well, as glass tends to be fairly contrasty. So there's high contrast in glass. So actually drawing out their reflection works out really well and doesn't hurt the rendering, as it adds contrast to the rendering. I'm adding a little bit of shaded value with my pen to the cap of the bottle. Just trying to add some texture in there. Later I'm going to come back with some marker and I'm going to add more value or color. When you're taking a look at glass, you can obviously see through the bottle. We're doing, or this bottle doesn't have any liquid in it. And the glass also has thickness. And you can see I just drew in the thickness of the bottle on the right and the left. And even at the bottom, as you can see, the highlight kind of curves to the back of the glass as you see it wrap around the back. And so I'm adding thickness all around the edges to show the material thickness that this bottle actually has. When you're doing a rendering for a presentation, there are often other things that you may want to include in that rendering. And so here I just sketched out a couple of caps that you might include when you're doing a presentation like this. And I'm also drawing a super quick perspective of the top of the bottle. I may want to show what you can't see in the main rendering, like where the threads are, where the cap would actually cover. So I draw that on the right side of the page as part of my demo. It actually sort of messes up my shadow, but for this case it's just a demo, and it's more about the things that you need to know when you're drawing for industry to show a presentation. Things that you want to have. Things that you can't see in the regular rendering that you may want to show to a client, a detail or something like that. So I've started to lay in my core value right down the middle off to the left, and I probably started with about a 5 or a 6 gray. I've come back and I've added just a little bit of interest into the glass. You see on the right hand side of the glass, the marker, I start and stop to add a little bit of contrast, as glass is often that way. I make the top core shadow a little bit darker, as that would be in shadow a little bit in this rendering, because the bottle is kind of hourglass shaped and has that Coke shape in the middle of it. I come back and I'm darkening out the edges or the highlights, and I come back in with my pen here to add a little bit of detail and just make it even darker to simulate the thickness of the glass and the light not refracting through the glass on the edges like that. You will get some refraction, but not a lot on the edges like that, so the edges of glass tend to be pretty dark. I'm actually using something I don't normally use. This is a little whiteout pen that somebody had during the demo, and I'm using it to add in some sharp, contrasty highlights. It's actually working pretty good because it's glass. You can kind of get away with that to show the real sort of shiny reflectiveness of the glass. And it's kind of working out to my benefit. I'm adding in a little bit of value in the cap to make that darker. I want to have it stand out and have some contrast against the glass. So I'm making this cap relatively dark. It could be like a steel or a plastic cap, probably plastic, and I lay in my shadow. Now normally when you have a shadow that's cast by an object, the shadow tends to be relatively dark. In this case it's glass, so we're really not getting much of a cast shadow, and I just kind of leave those lines to show the thickness of the glass. Casting a shadow on the ground like that tends to be pretty light, and I add in actually just a little bit of darkness that's cast by the cap from the glass bottle onto the ground. That's really all that you can see. It just helps tell the story a little bit more about what kind of material we're looking at. At this point, I scanned in the drawing. Now, normally you probably wouldn't scan in a drawing done on newsprint, as it's pretty low quality, but I felt there was a good opportunity here to exploit the newsprint, as it has a tone, and I thought I could add a little bit of detail beyond what I did in the rendering in Photoshop to add some value. So because it's on newsprint, I have the opportunity to really add some white highlights in the glass itself, which I've done. You can see that increasing that contrast makes the bottle more believable. I'm kind of cleaning up the sketch because I can do that in Photoshop. I'm using the clone tool to just clone out some of the lines that were construction lines. And now I'm going in and I'm just adding a little bit of value to the ground plane. That allows the shadow or the reflected light through the glass to become a little bit lighter on the ground, almost like the light is being magnified through this curved glass and lighting up the ground. And you would get this potentially from the glass material. Again, it's just adding to the story so the viewer can understand what kind of material that they're looking at. When you're doing a rendering like this, ultimately you're just trying to convey the different materials, tell a story to a client about what type of material their product could be made out of. I'm adding a little bit of color into the cap now. That's pretty simple to do in Photoshop. I've selected kind of a blue color, and this is the final rendering. I'm not going to do too much to it since it is newsprint, and want to leave it super simple and make it really easy. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube page. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Don't forget to share this video with all your friends on social media. Let them know that I have many more. There should be a lot more coming up in the future. If you like the music in this video, head on over to Mike's website, 𝗪𝗏𝗍𝗍𝗏𝗏.com. Give him a shout out. Let him know you like it. Rock on.